The new video this evening involving actor Cuba Gooding Jr., who is fighting those allegations of groping a woman here in New York City. Well, tonight, here's surveillance video obtained by TMZ.
Fame can be a blessing, but without a strong foundation, it can also become a curse. Many black actors rose to stardom with powerful talent and inspiring beginnings, often rooted in faith and purpose. But somewhere along the way, some lost their spiritual grounding and things began to spiral. From personal scandals to career crashes, here are 20 black actors who lost faith and went downhill. 1. Richard Pryor.
I went out to a nightclub here in L.A. one time, and people beat me to death.
Right.
I mean, Richard! My man!
Richard Pryor was like lightning in a bottle, funny, raw, and completely unpredictable. This man could make people laugh until their sides hurt, but behind all those jokes was someone fighting some serious battles. Pryor grew up in his grandmother's brothel in Illinois, which sounds like the setup to a dark comedy, but it was his real life. His comedy career took off in the 1960s, and he became famous for telling stories that made people uncomfortable but couldn't stop laughing. Movies like Silver Streak and Stir Crazy made him a household name, but Pryor had this habit of setting himself on fire, literally and figuratively. In 1980, he accidentally lit himself ablaze while freebasing, which he later joked about in his stand-up, because that's just how he dealt with trauma. The weren't just a Hollywood phase for Pryor. They were his way of dealing with a world that felt too heavy. He talked openly about his struggles with addiction, his multiple marriages, and his battles with depression. His comedy specials like Live on the Sunset Strip were basically therapy sessions that happened to be hilarious. As the years went on, Pryor's health declined rapidly. Multiple sclerosis hit him hard in the 1980s, and you could see him physically deteriorating on stage. But even when he could barely walk, he kept performing. His last years were spent mostly in wheelchairs, and he died in 2005, leaving behind a legacy of groundbreaking comedy and a cautionary tale about the price of genius. 2. Dave Chappelle.
I'm glad you're here. Everybody wants to know, why'd you walk away from $50 million?
I wasn't walking away from the money. I was walking away from the circumstances.
Dave Chappelle was on top of the world with his Chappelle Show, making Comedy Central millions and becoming the most talked about comedian on television. Then, in 2005, he did something nobody saw coming. He walked away from a $50 million contract and disappeared to Africa. The official story was that he needed a break, but rumors swirled about nervous breakdowns, creative differences, and the pressures of fame. Chappelle himself later explained that he felt the show was being laughed at for the wrong reasons, and he didn't want to perpetuate racial stereotypes, even for comedy. His disappearance became legendary. People spotted him in small clubs, doing random shows, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. He moved to a farm in Ohio, far away from Hollywood's glittering chaos. For years, he barely performed, turning down huge offers and staying out of the spotlight. When he finally returned to stand up regularly in the 2000s, he seemed different, more thoughtful, more careful about his material. His Netflix specials showed a man who'd wrestled with his demons and come out the other side, but you could tell the experience had changed him fundamentally. 3. Chris Tucker.
I mean, Ben and my buddy Dave Chappelle, they always joke like, you know everybody, man, you're everywhere. Where are you right now? I'm like, I'm in Saudi Arabia with the king.
Chris Tucker burst onto the scene in the 1990s with his high-pitched voice and manic energy. Friday made him famous, and the Rush Hour movies with Jackie Chan made him rich, really rich. At one point, he was one of the highest-paid actors in Hollywood, earning $25 million per film. But then, Tucker started getting picky about his roles. He turned down Friday sequels, said no to other comedies, and seemed to lose interest in the very thing that made him successful. He became a born-again Christian and started being more selective about projects that aligned with his beliefs. The problem was, Tucker's comedy style was so specific that when he tried to clean it up, it lost some of its edge. His later films didn't hit the same way, and Hollywood moved on to other comedians. He also had some serious tax troubles with the IRS, owing millions in back taxes, which probably didn't help his career choices. Tucker spent years doing stand-up tours to pay off his debts and rebuild his brand. He'd pop up occasionally in small roles, but never regained that rush-hour-level stardom. These days, he seems content doing his own thing, but it's clear that his peak was behind him by the mid-2000s. 4. Martin Lawrence.
So let me ask you this. What is happening in Hollywood that a guy that tough will be on the street waving a gun, screaming, "They are trying to kill me"?
Martin Lawrence was everywhere in the 1990s. His TV show Martin was must-see television, and movies like Bad Boys and Big Mama's House made him a box office star. He had this amazing ability to play multiple characters and make each one completely believable and hilarious. But Lawrence's personal life was a complete mess. He had several public meltdowns, including a bizarre incident in 1996 where he was found standing in traffic with a gun, yelling at cars. He was hospitalized multiple times for exhaustion and dehydration during film shoots, particularly while making Nothing to Lose. His erratic behavior led to conflicts on movie sets and with co-stars. There were reports of him being difficult to work with, showing up late, and having outbursts. His marriage fell apart publicly, and he faced various legal issues throughout the late 1990s and early 2000s. Lawrence managed to bounce back somewhat with the Bad Boys sequels and continued touring as a stand-up comedian. But his peak years were clearly behind him, and he never quite recaptured that mid-1990s magic when he seemed unstoppable. He's still working today, but more as a legacy act than an A-list star. 5. Eddie Griffin.
Look, you teach us to teach our children that violence is not the way, but when it comes to y'all, it seems violence is the way.
Eddie Griffin had all the talent in the world. He was a gifted stand-up comedian, a solid actor, and could improvise like nobody's business. Movies like Undercover Brother showed off his comedic range, and his stand-up specials were genuinely funny and provocative. But Griffin also had a reputation for being unpredictable and difficult. He struggled with addiction issues and had several run-ins with the law. His career was marked by missed opportunities and self-destructive behavior that kept him from reaching his full potential. Griffin was also known for his controversial political and social commentary, which sometimes overshadowed his comedy. He'd go off on tangents during performances that would make audiences uncomfortable, and his behavior became increasingly erratic over the years. Despite his problems, Griffin kept working steadily in smaller films and continued touring. He never quite broke through to that next level of stardom, partly due to his own choices and partly due to circumstances beyond his control. His story is one of talent partially wasted, though he's still performing today. 6. Isaiah Washington.
Seriously? Seriously?
No, I did not call TR a faggot. It never happened.
Isaiah Washington seemed to have it made when he joined the cast of Grey's Anatomy in 2005. The show was a huge hit, and his character, Dr. Preston Burke, was a fan favorite. Washington was a talented dramatic actor with a strong presence and seemed destined for bigger things. Then came the incident that changed everything. During a heated on-set argument in 2006, Washington allegedly used a homophobic slur when referring to co-star Theodore Raymond Knight. The situation exploded into a major controversy, especially when Washington repeated the slur at the Golden Globe Awards while trying to deny he'd ever said it. A BC fired him from Grey's Anatomy, and Hollywood essentially blacklisted him. Washington tried to rebuild his career, working in smaller films and even moving to Africa to work in the film industry there. He became politically active and tried to reinvent himself as a serious dramatic actor. But the damage was done. Washington never regained his former status in Hollywood, and his career became a series of small roles and independent projects. He's still working today, but he went from being on one of television's biggest shows to being a cautionary tale about how quickly a career can end. 7. Orlando Brown.
Disney Channel's star is busted again right here in Las Vegas. Police tell us that Orlando Brown was arrested Monday for narcotics possession.
Orlando Brown started as a child actor on shows like That's So Raven, where he played Eddie Thomas, Raven's best friend. He seemed like he was on track for a successful career in entertainment, with his natural comedic timing and likable screen presence. But as Brown got older, things started falling apart. He began having legal troubles, including arrests for domestic violence, possession, and other charges. His behavior became increasingly erratic, and he started making bizarre claims in interviews and on social media. Brown's struggles with substance abuse became very public, and his appearances on talk shows and podcasts often featured rambling, incoherent statements. He claimed to have had relationships with various celebrities and made other outlandish statements that suggested serious mental health issues. His downward spiral was painful to watch, especially for people who remembered him as a talented young performer. Brown has attempted comebacks and claimed to be sober multiple times, but his career never recovered from his personal problems. 8. Gary Dourdan.
The star of one of America's most popular TV shows has been arrested on charges. CSI actor Gary Dourdan.
Gary Dourdan was smooth and charismatic as Warwick Brown on CSI Crime Scene Investigation. For 9 seasons, he was part of one of television's most successful franchises, and it seemed like he had a bright future ahead of him in Hollywood. But Dourdan's personal life was falling apart behind the scenes. He had multiple arrests for possession and domestic violence. His substance abuse problems became increasingly serious, and his behavior on set reportedly became problematic. In 2008, Dourdan was written off CSI after his character was killed off. His post-CSI career consisted mostly of small roles in independent films and direct-to-video movies. He continued to have legal troubles and financial problems, including bankruptcy. Dourdan's story is particularly sad because he seemed to have everything going for him during his CSI years. He was on a hit show, had a steady income, and was well-liked by fans. But his addictions and legal problems derailed what could have been a long and successful career in television and film. 9. Terrence Howard.
A Mississippi attorney has a new role. He has been hired to represent actor Terrence Howard in a lawsuit involving a hit TV show.
Terrence Howard was an Oscar-nominated actor who seemed destined for greatness. His performance in Hustle and Flow earned him critical acclaim, and he was part of the original Iron Man cast as James Rhodes. He had dramatic chops, could sing, and had leading man looks. But Howard developed a reputation for being difficult to work with. He had public disputes with co-stars and directors, and his off-screen behavior became increasingly eccentric. He made strange claims about mathematics and science, insisting that 1 times 1 equals 2, and developing his own mathematical theories. His personal life was also turbulent, with multiple divorces and restraining orders filed against him by ex-wives. These controversies, combined with his reputation for being hard to work with, led to fewer and fewer high-profile roles. Howard was replaced by Don Cheadle in the Iron Man franchise, which was seen as a major career blow. While he found success on the TV show Empire, his film career never recovered its early momentum. 10. Monique.
I would like to thank the Academy for showing that it can be about the performance and not the politics.
Monique was riding high after winning an Academy Award for Best Supporting Actress for her powerful performance in Precious in 2010. She had successfully transitioned from stand-up comedy to serious dramatic acting and seemed poised for a long and successful career in Hollywood. But Monique's relationship with Hollywood soured quickly. She publicly feuded with entertainment moguls Tyler Perry, Oprah Winfrey, and Lee Daniels, claiming they had blackballed her from the industry. She said she was labeled difficult for not campaigning for her Oscar without pay and for refusing to do unpaid promotional work. Her career opportunities dried up almost immediately after her Oscar win. Instead of getting bigger roles, she found herself shut out of major projects. Monique claimed this was because she wouldn't play the game and stood up for herself as a black woman in Hollywood. She continued doing stand-up comedy and took smaller roles, but never regained the momentum she had after Precious. Her lawsuit against Netflix over what she claimed was racial and gender discrimination in their pay offer kept her in the headlines, but not necessarily for her acting work. Monique's story became a talking point about how the entertainment industry treats outspoken black women. 11. Wesley Snipes.
Wesley Snipes has received the maximum sentence. Prosecutors had pressed for that maximum sentence of 3 years because Snipes did not file his taxes for 3 years.
Wesley Snipes was basically the coolest action star of the 1990s. This guy could kick, punch, and deliver one-liners like nobody's business. Movies like New Jack City, White Men Can't Jump, and especially the Blade trilogy made him a household name. He was doing martial arts before it was trendy in Hollywood, and his vampire hunter character Blade was so popular it helped launch the modern superhero movie craze. But Snipes had a problem with the tax man. Starting in the early 2000s, he got mixed up with some questionable tax advisors who convinced him that paying federal income taxes was optional. Snipes stopped filing tax returns and owed the IRS millions of dollars. He got involved with groups that promoted anti-tax theories, which sounds rebellious until you realize the government doesn't mess around with tax collection. The legal troubles started piling up around 2006 when he was charged with tax fraud. Snipes tried fighting the charges in court, but the evidence was pretty clear. He hadn't paid taxes on millions in earnings. In 2008, he was sentenced to 3 years in federal prison. The man who once fought vampires was now fighting the federal prison system. Prison time pretty much killed his momentum as an action star. By the time he got out in 2013, Hollywood had moved on to younger action heroes. Snipes tried making a comeback with movies like The Expendables 3, but he never quite recaptured that 1990s magic. His tax problems cost him way more than just money. They cost him his career during what should have been his prime years. These days, Snipes still acts in smaller films and seems to have learned his lesson about taxes. But going from headlining major action franchises to doing straight-to-video movies is quite a fall. His story shows that even the coolest vampire hunter can get taken down by something as boring as tax forms. 12. Cuba Gooding Jr.
Cuba Gooding Jr. flashed a confident smile as he strolled up to the front entrance of the Special Victims Unit Thursday, only to be led out the back hours later in handcuffs.
Cuba Gooding Jr. had one of those moments that most actors dream about, winning an Oscar and giving an acceptance speech so enthusiastic that people still remember it decades later. His "Show me the money" line from Jerry Maguire became part of pop culture, and his Oscar win for the same film in 1997 should have launched him into A-list stardom. But something weird happened after that Oscar win. Instead of getting better roles, Gooding seemed to start picking increasingly strange projects. Movies like Boat Trip, Snow Dogs, and Daddy Day Camp weren't exactly prestigious follow-ups to an Academy Award. It was like he was actively trying to damage his own career, one terrible comedy at a time. The real problems started surfacing in the 2010s when multiple women began accusing Gooding of inappropriate behavior. The allegations ranged from unwanted touching to more serious assault claims. These weren't just one or two isolated incidents. Dozens of women came forward with similar stories about encounters with the actor. Legal troubles followed the accusations. Gooding was arrested multiple times on charges related to these allegations. Court appearances became more common than movie premieres for the former Oscar winner. His reputation in Hollywood took a massive hit, and roles became harder to come by. The fall from grace was particularly stark because Gooding had seemed like such a likable, energetic performer in his early career. Movies like Boys in the Hood showed he had serious dramatic chops, and his comedic timing in Jerry Maguire was perfect. But personal behavior and poor career choices turned him from a celebrated actor into a cautionary tale. Recent years have seen Gooding trying to rebuild his image and career, but the damage from the allegations and legal troubles has been extensive. His story shows how personal conduct can completely overshadow professional achievements, even an Oscar win. 13. Lorenz Tate.
After starring in box office hits like Menace to Society, Love Jones, and Dead Presidents, the 39-year-old actor is back in demand, and he couldn't be happier.
Lorenz Tate burst onto the scene in the 1990s with incredible performances that showed serious dramatic range. His role as O-Dog in Menace to Society was absolutely chilling. He played a young sociopath so convincingly that it made people uncomfortable. Then he completely switched gears and played the romantic lead in Love Jones, showing he could do tender romance just as well as intense drama. The late 1990s and early 2000s seemed promising for Tate. He had the looks, the talent, and the versatility that Hollywood usually rewards. Movies like Dead Presidents and The Postman showed he could handle different genres, and his performances were consistently strong. But somewhere along the way, Tate's career momentum just faded. He never broke through to that next level of stardom that seemed inevitable after his early successes. Instead of leading major films, he found himself in supporting roles or smaller independent projects. It wasn't that he stopped working, he just stopped getting the high-profile roles that make careers. Part of the issue seemed to be timing and luck. The roles that could have elevated him to superstardom went to other actors, and Hollywood moved on to new faces. Tate also seemed to prioritize family life over career ambition, which is admirable but doesn't always help in the cutthroat entertainment business. Television became Tate's main focus, with steady work on shows like Rescue Me and Power. These were good roles that paid well, but they were a far cry from the movie stardom that once seemed within reach. He became a working actor rather than a star, which isn't necessarily bad, but represents unfulfilled potential. Tate's story is more about missed opportunities and bad timing than personal scandals or self-destructive behavior. Sometimes careers just don't go according to plan, even when the talent is clearly there. 14. Tracy Morgan.
Of comedian and actor Tracy Morgan. He's once again apologizing this morning for his recent anti-gay rant.
Tracy Morgan was the wild card on Saturday Night Live for 7 seasons, bringing unpredictable energy and characters that were simultaneously hilarious and slightly disturbing. His time on Saturday Night Live led to his role as Tracy Jordan on 30 Rock, where he basically played an exaggerated version of himself and earned Emmy nominations. But Morgan's real life was often messier than his fictional characters. He struggled with alcohol and addiction for years, and his behavior became increasingly erratic. Stories from Saturday Night Live and 30 Rock sets described an actor who was talented but unreliable, sometimes showing up unprepared or under the influence. His stand-up comedy routines often included controversial material that got him in trouble. Morgan made comments about various topics that offended different groups, leading to public apologies and sensitivity training. His humor was always edgy, but sometimes it crossed lines that damaged his reputation. The turning point came in 2014 when Morgan was severely injured in a car accident involving a Walmart truck driver who had been awake for over 24 hours. The crash killed Morgan's friend and fellow comedian James McNair and left Morgan in a coma for several days. His recovery was long and difficult, involving brain injury, rehabilitation, and learning to walk again. The accident seemed to change Morgan's perspective on life. When he returned to performing, he was more reflective and grateful. His 2017 Netflix special, The son of Richard Pryor showed a man who had been through hell and came out the other side with a different outlook. While Morgan continues to work in television and comedy, the accident effectively ended one phase of his career and began another. His story shows how quickly everything can change and how personal struggles can be overcome with determination and support. 15. Cat Williams.
Really? You coming after my kids now? 'Cause it was already a witch hunt. Now you want my babies? Yikes.
Cat Williams is one of those comedians who's genuinely hilarious when he's on his game, but staying on his game seems to be the problem. His stand-up specials like The Pimp Chronicles, Part 1 showed off his incredible storytelling ability and unique perspective on life. He could go from making jokes about everyday situations to delivering social commentary that made people think. But Williams also became famous for all the wrong reasons. His legal troubles read like a comedy routine gone wrong, arrests for everything from assault to weapons charges to child endangerment. It seemed like every few months there was a new headline about Williams getting into trouble with the law. His behavior became increasingly unpredictable. Williams would show up late to performances, have public meltdowns, and get into feuds with other comedians. Videos of him getting into physical altercations or having bizarre interviews went viral for all the wrong reasons. Fans never knew if they'd get brilliant Cat Williams or chaotic Cat Williams. Mental health issues seemed to play a role in Williams' erratic behavior. He talked openly about struggling with depression and the pressures of fame. The entertainment industry can be brutal on performers' mental health, and Williams seemed to be dealing with those pressures in unhealthy ways. Despite all the chaos, Williams kept performing and maintained a loyal fan base who appreciated his comedy when he could deliver it. His 2016 Netflix special Great America showed flashes of the brilliant comedian he could be, but consistency remained an issue. Williams's story is frustrating because his talent is undeniable, but his personal struggles keep getting in the way of his professional success. He represents wasted potential and the challenges that come with being a gifted performer who can't get out of his own way. 16. Chris Rock.
Oh, wow. Wow. Will Smith just smacked the shit out of me.
Chris Rock seemed to have everything figured out. He was one of the most successful comedians in the world, with hit movies, HBO specials, and respect from his peers. Shows like Everybody Hates Chris and specials like Bring the Pain made him wealthy and famous. But success doesn't protect anyone from personal struggles. Rock has been open about his battles with depression and periods where he lost faith in himself and his abilities. Despite his success, he struggled with feeling like an imposter and questioning whether he deserved his achievements. These feelings are common among high achievers, but can be particularly challenging for performers who depend on confidence. His personal life also had its struggles. Rock's marriage fell apart publicly, with admissions of infidelity on his part. Divorce proceedings revealed personal details that made headlines and showed that his private life wasn't as successful as his career appeared to be. The comedian also dealt with the pressures of being one of the most prominent black voices in comedy. Rock felt responsible for addressing social issues and representing his community, which added extra weight to his performances and public statements. This kind of pressure can be overwhelming even for someone as talented as Rock. Rock's struggles with relationships and self-doubt didn't end his career, but they affected his mental health and personal happiness. His later comedy specials often dealt with these themes, showing a more vulnerable side of the usually confident performer. 17. Kevin Hart.
I know that I'm going to hurt the people closest to me, who I've talked to and apologized to, being my wife and my kids. And I just, it's a shitty moment.
Kevin Hart built a comedy empire through relentless work ethic and clever business decisions. His movies consistently made money, his stand-up tours sold out arenas, and his social media presence made him one of the most recognizable entertainers in the world. Hart seemed to have cracked the code on modern celebrity success, but Hart's personal life kept creating problems that threatened his carefully built brand. In 2017, he was caught in a cheating scandal while his wife was pregnant with their second child. The situation became public when someone tried to extort Hart with compromising photos and videos. Hart initially tried to handle the scandal quietly, but eventually had to make public apologies to his wife and family. The incident damaged his reputation as a family man and showed a different side of the comedian who often joked about his marriage and children in his routines. More controversy came when old homophobic tweets and jokes from Hart's earlier career resurfaced. When he was chosen to host the Academy Awards in 2018, the backlash over these old comments forced him to step down from what should have been the biggest gig of his career. Hart's response to these controversies revealed someone who struggled with taking accountability. His apologies often seemed more focused on defending himself than understanding why people were hurt by his actions. This pattern of behavior suggested deeper issues with personal growth and self-reflection. Despite these setbacks, Hart continued to work and make money, but his reputation was permanently altered. 18. Jamie Foxx.
You know what's crazy? I used to follow Diddy back in the day when Diddy had all of the songs out. Yeah. He was so famous, we couldn't get into our own clubs in LA.
Jamie Foxx seemed unstoppable in the mid-2000s. His transformation into Ray Charles for the movie Ray was so complete that it earned him an Academy Award and showed the world he was more than just a comedian. He could sing, act, do comedy, and even had a successful music career with hits like Blame It. But Foxx's personal life was often messy. His relationships were frequently in the tabloids, and his party lifestyle was legendary in Hollywood circles. Stories about his behavior at clubs and parties suggested someone who might be enjoying the perks of fame a little too much. Professional relationships also seemed to suffer from Foxx's reported ego and difficult behavior on sets. There were stories of conflicts with directors and co-stars, suggesting that success had made him harder to work with. In Hollywood, being talented is important, but being easy to work with is often more important for long-term success. Foxx also made headlines for controversial comments and behavior that had nothing to do with his professional work. His jokes and statements sometimes offended people and created unnecessary drama that distracted from his actual performances. Despite these issues, Foxx continued to work steadily in both movies and television. His career never completely derailed like some others, but the combination of personal controversies and professional difficulties kept him from reaching even greater heights. 19. Lawrence Fishburne.
Well, when you go to a premiere, yeah, that's the one opportunity that you can get to see it with an audience. This is particularly special because it's a non-industry audience.
Lawrence Fishburne was one of the most respected dramatic actors of his generation. His performances in movies like Boys in the Hood, What's Love Got to Do with It, and the Matrix trilogy showed incredible range and gravitas. He had the kind of commanding presence that made him perfect for authority figures and complex characters. But Fishburne's personal life created challenges that affected his public image. His daughter Montana made headlines for all the wrong reasons, including releasing adult films and making controversial public statements. As a father, these situations were painful and embarrassing for Fishburne, who had built his reputation on dignity and professionalism. Family struggles continued with highly publicized conflicts and legal issues involving his children. Fishburne tried to keep his private life separate from his career, but in the age of social media and tabloid culture, that became increasingly difficult. The actor also seemed to struggle with choosing roles that matched his earlier successes. Some of his later career choices were puzzling, and he appeared in projects that seemed beneath his talent level. Whether these were financial decisions or simply bad judgment, they didn't help maintain his status as one of Hollywood's premier actors. Fishburne's television work, particularly on CSI Crime Scene Investigation, was successful, but represented a step down from his movie career. While television has become more prestigious, at the time, it felt like a retreat from film stardom. 20. Samuel Leroy Jackson.
I had teachers who told me things like, if you want to be great, you have to learn how to be drunk and high and still do the play, because that's like all the great ones.
Before Samuel Leroy Jackson became the coolest movie star on the planet, he was a struggling actor with serious addiction problems. His early career was marked by and alcohol abuse that nearly ended everything before it really began. Jackson has been open about hitting rock bottom in the 1980s and having to choose between sobriety and losing everything. The turnaround came when Jackson got sober and started taking his career seriously. His breakout role in Jungle Fever led to his iconic performance in Pulp Fiction, and suddenly he was one of the most in-demand actors in Hollywood. Movies like Snakes on a Plane showed he could have fun with his image while still delivering great performances. But Jackson's story is unique because it's about recovery and redemption rather than decline. His struggles with addiction happened early in his career, and overcoming them actually made him stronger and more focused as a performer. Getting sober didn't just save his life, it launched him into superstardom. Jackson became known for his professionalism and work ethic, often doing multiple movies per year and never seeming to turn down interesting projects. His willingness to work consistently and his reputation for being easy to work with made him one of Hollywood's most reliable stars. The actor's openness about his past struggles helped other performers who were dealing with similar issues. Jackson proved that addiction doesn't have to end a career if someone is willing to do the work to get clean and stay clean. His story is actually inspirational rather than cautionary. It shows that people can overcome serious personal problems and achieve great success. Jackson went from nearly losing everything to becoming one of the most successful actors of his generation. Their stories are a powerful reminder that talent alone isn't enough to stay on top. When faith fades, even the brightest stars can lose their way.